Hi, I'm Charisma Stocks, and I decided to do a review on Shakespeare in the Bush by Laura Bohannan. She was an American anthropologist that traveled to West Africa to live with the Thai people. She was confident in Shakespeare, Hamlet, so she decided to tell the story to the elders. By her surprise, they reinterpreted the plot through their own cultural framework. The impact it had on her worldview and also cultural meaning was that how culture shapes interpretation. The Thai people, they didn't drink just to forget things. They drank to engage in stories and reinterpreted the Hamlet by Shakespeare. They reinterpreted that to fit their own worldview. And this supports the discussion about intercultural communication. One ethnocentric bias that could be considered is she assumed that because they played games, themes based on grief, betrayal, revenge in the story, that resonated well with Western culture. And she assumed that it would be understood the same by the Thai people. And this assumption treated Western literature as the standard by which stories should be told. Her bias was exposed when the Thai elders reinterpreted the plot entirely, adding ghosts are impossible. Claudia's marriage was improper, and Hamlet was foolish. This story challenges the notion that one culture's values are necessarily best or normal by challenging the notion of Western culture and how it is measured. If a Shakespeare play is the pinnacle of English literature, then what claims to normal or best are truly defensible? The article exposes that culture, practices, and values, and even art are meaningful only within its specific context. Well, from my point of view, I resonate with this because my mom is from New York. How we communicate may sound loudness or aggressive, but for example, I was on the phone with a friend, and I was on the phone with my mom, and a friend overheard our conversation, and she assumed that my mother was either really angry or really mean at that point. And I had to reassure her that no, my mom just talks that way. Everything's fine. You know, she's kind of fast paced, get to the point. Growing up in New York, the culture was completely different than when we moved to North Carolina. The politeness that we received from neighbors was completely different than being in New York, where everything was so fast paced. People never really even stopped to say hello. To me, that's just, to me, the language in New York, or the language that I grew up around, is normal. But to someone else, it could seem as if, you know, we're being aggressive or we want a conflict when really we're just talking. But as Kraft argues, messages and meanings are distinct. The message of Hamlet was the same, but the tithe message took it, the tithe people took the message differently, well, the meaning differently based on their worldview. Bohannon's mistake was not telling the story, it was assuming her interpretation was the only valid one.